Hello again, and welcome to another session in the 18th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment Virtual Conference. I'm Bob Hales, I'm your moderator, and happy Friday the 13th. Hopefully, it'll be a good one for us. Uh, Amy, we got Linda. Hi, all. Great. We're fortunate this year we are sponsored by the Journal of Educators Online. And it just happens to be that our presenter today, Jane Mandernach, is the editor of this journal. I'm sharing my screen. You should see some of the titles that are there. It's a referee journal, and you should find several that'll be of interest to you. If you don't, you're not looking hard enough. uh, but we have uh, Oh, excuse me. We have Jean Mandernach with us. She's the Executive Director of the Center for Innovation and Research on Teaching and the Center for Educational Technology and Learning Advancement at Grand Canyon University. She researches online pedagogy, assessment, faculty evaluation, learning analytics, and the transformative role of AI in higher education. And that's all just before lunchtime. She's a nationally recognized expert and frequently uh, consults on institutional AI adoption. Um, we've been fortunate to have Jean present for us numerous times over the years. She always has great information. And Jean, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. We're going to talk about a problem that we've been all dealing with now for the last couple of years, although the last year has felt more intense than most. Every time AI comes up in higher education, the first thing that happens is all faculty roll their eyes and go, oh my gosh, like I'm so tired of students using AI. Everything I'm reading is AI generated, everything they're writing is AI. And it feels like, as faculty, we've just become the AI police. And we're constantly trying to figure out, did the student write this? Did AI write this? What does the student know? But it's about time that we start shifting our thinking, because all of this focus on the AI police really is causing us to hold on to our old views of assessment and the idea that what we used to be doing is the best way to assess learning. But I would actually argue that the way we used to assess learning was driven primarily by practical constraints. There was one faculty member, lots of students, and so we had to look at assessment strategies that really allowed us to assess the masses. So we would do traditional tests, we would do papers, but almost everything was really designed under this idea that there's only one of me, there's lots of these students, and I can't individually see how they're thinking. The challenge is, first of all, AI now allows students to complete most of those assessments pretty darn quickly and easily. But the second problem is AI is now giving us options that we're not necessarily taking advantage of. And that's really what I want to talk about today. Not how do we hold tight to, like, is AI allowed in my course, but rather shifting our thinking and starting to ask ourselves, when and where should I bring AI into my classroom to really enhance the learning, to improve learning, to allow me to see aspects of the learning experience that I didn't used to be able to see because it just wasn't practical when I have 50 students? When should we really be thinking about, where do I bring AI in because it helps me meet my learning objectives? And where do I need to redesign my assignments because the use of AI is really going to undermine those learning objectives? The question is not, do I allow AI? AI is now a tool and it's there. And like it or not, in most cases, students are going to be using it in some way, shape, or form. So we need to start shifting our thinking and really thinking more pedagogically. We need to think about learning, not about AI. Because if we can shift our mindset, we can start to think about AI as a tool, the same way we think about all the other tools that students have available to them. they have the internet, they have computers, they have statistical programs, they have, presentation development programs. AI is just another tool. And when that tool helps us to meet our learning objectives, we want to be intentional and we want to bring it in. Because our challenge when we sit there and get frustrated with students for using AI, it's not really an AI issue. The issue is when they use AI, we can no longer effectively assess their learning because we don't know what's them and we don't know what's AI. And in many cases, even when the product of a student's work is AI supported, that student still did the cognitive work. And as faculty, we need to start separating out that process from the product because AI now gives us, probably for the first time in history, the option of seeing some of those process of learning steps. Because if we just approach our classes saying no AI or you can't use AI, the problem is students are just going to work around it because AI is a tool that's not only available to them, but it's one that they know they are going to need to use for their future. And so they are going to use it. We just need to think about what this means when we're focusing on learning. And really, when you get back to that learning, then we can start to put it into buckets. Sometimes we really want students to independently think. We don't want them to go to AI for a shortcut to give them options. We don't want them to use AI to help them brainstorm because part of that learning is going through the cognitive struggle. And so you need to think about for every learning objective that you have, do I need them to independently go through the cognitive struggle? Sometimes the answer is going to be yes, sometimes it's going to be no. But when we need them to do that, we now need to think about that in a bucket where we say, okay, in this bucket, I need to have evidence of independent reasoning. Sometimes we want it to be that they really can be informed consumers of information. We want them to be able to select it, evaluate it, synthesize it. And it could be that AI could support that process. So it might not be that we don't want AI involved. We just want to make sure students are using it in a meaningful fashion to complete that cognitive task. Sometimes it's about applying things to new situations. We just want students to take that knowledge that they have and we want to think about it in new contexts. Other times we want them to make judgments about it, thinking about the gray areas that so many of our disciplines work in. The first step when you start thinking about your assignments is not where is AI? The first step is to ask yourself, what is my actual evidence of learning? What do I really care about? Because oftentimes we're just still using the same kinds of assignments that we had when we were students or that we've used for the last 10 years as faculty because they used to work really well. They might not work as well anymore. And so now it's time for us to really start to do an autopsy of those assignments to say, what do I really care about? And what does learning really look like? This is a task that you're going to do without even considering AI yet. You just want to think about what does learning look like? And from that, then, now that you have your list of like, this is how I would know that my student actually achieved this learning objective, now you could start to ask yourself, and what would I need a student to do without AI for me to know that whatever that thing is that I'm grading reflects that evidence of learning? And related to that, if a student did use AI to help with this assignment, would I still know if they completed the learning objectives? What would it have to look like for me to know that learning still happened? Because oftentimes our assignments put a really high emphasis on the product of what a student is submitting to us. And that's not often what we care about. Now, it might be. And that's when we go back to those evidence of learning. What does learning look like? And if it looks like a clean, polished, well-written paper, then that's what we want to do. But oftentimes what we're saying is, it's a student's ability to think, it's their ability to ask questions, it's ability to reason. But we used to just use a paper as a proxy for those things. But now you could actually start asking yourself, could I actually use AI to grade their thinking, the way they ask questions, the way they process that information? Because if so, we can now start changing the assignment to do that. But we have to make this critical distinction between what I care about. Do I care about the process of learning or do I care about the product of learning? And I'll tell you, in my classes, both. Now, not always at the same time, not always at the same weight, but sometimes I really want to know what kind of questions were students asking? Were they thinking critically? Were they digging deeper? Were they diving in on the right points? That's a question about the process of learning. Other times, I really do care about can they form a cohesive argument and defend that argument? Now, that might be more about the product of learning. You just need to go back and ask yourself for every given learning objective, for every assignment that I have, is it one? Is it the other? Is it both? And if it's at both, at what level and at what weight? Because when you can start to dig these apart, now you can start to think about how AI can be brought into this process or redesigned to be excluded so that you can actually measure what you care about. Because if you care about the process of learning, you might start shifting some of your tasks around. And you might say, I'm actually interested in how you think about this topic. You're novices in this area. I know you don't have a huge background to be able to pull from all these different perspectives. So I want you to use AI as a brainstorming partner. What I'm most interested in is what questions you ask it, which ideas that you liked that it picked out, why you liked those ideas. So your assessment in that case might actually be having students submit their chat history about a particular topic that you want them to dive in on. And you tell students in the rubric and the chat history and whatever it is, here's what I care about. I'm looking at the quality of your questions. And in the end, it wasn't about could you produce this beautiful paper about it. I don't even need you to write a reflection about it because I can see your thinking. I can see how you ask the questions, where you ask the questions, what you dove into. So go ahead and use AI and just submit that process product to me. It might be that you really care about how they're organizing their ideas, how they're putting their cognitive structure together and thinking about it. That's another task that you can say, go ahead and use AI. And I want you to explore different options, have it give you an outline, challenge the outline, have it reorganize it in a different way. I want to see how you thought about putting this information together. I want to see what you thought was important. I just got done grading one of these assignments yesterday, and it was so interesting to have the student. They started very simply with, I want to put together an argument about, and this one happened to be on de-individuation. It was a social psychology class. And they said, I want to put together an argument about de-individuation and how it's influencing people's attitudes right now online towards everything that's happening with ICE. That's where they started. And then AI whipped out this big argument for them. And then the student said, well, that's not my main point. My main point here is that they're anonymous online. So that's what you need to highlight. And it whipped out another outline for them. And then it said, I really want to tap into what was recently happening in Minneapolis because that's where I saw it. And then AI whipped out another outline. And the student kept going back, telling it what it thought was important, how it wanted it organized. It would ask questions and it would say, right now you gave this and then you gave this. Would it make more sense to flip that around? That's what I cared about in that assignment. In the end, did I care as much about that product? No, but it's really insightful to see a student saying, this is what I think is important. Do we put it in that order? Is that the right argument? Is this a strong justification? Because now they're thinking. And for that assignment, what did the students have to submit? Literally their chat log. That was it. Because I didn't need to add another step that was a product because I could actually assess the process. It might be generating examples for practice. This is one that I often tell students I have them do. It used to be that I would give them review quizzes and they would have to do the review quizzes. Well, let's face it, they can now sit there with their phone and take pictures of a quiz and get the answers immediately. They don't need to sit there and look it up. So now what I've done is I've flipped it around and I've said, I want you to go to AI and I want you to tell AI that you're prepping to understand the following learning objectives. You want it to ask you questions, and if you're answering them right, be adaptive. Don't ask me anymore, but keep asking me questions. I said, I want you to do that activity for 15 minutes. That's it. Put a timer out, 15 minutes. And then at the end of 15 minutes, tell AI, summarize what I know really well and summarize what I don't know very well. And then I told students, that's all I need you to turn in, and I want you to say whether you agree or disagree with its analysis. Because I really wanted them to practice and I wanted them to think about what they know and what they don't know. So it wasn't quizzing them where they felt like they had to get a right answer. It was preparing them. It might be them thinking about how they communicate, editing things. So some assignments, it might be that you tell students, I want you to start with your own draft, as ugly as that draft may be. It doesn't have to be complete sentences. It can be bullet points, but start with your draft. Then I want you to upload the draft and have AI give you suggestions, not rewrite it for you, but tell you what you should rewrite. And now I want you to see, do you agree? Do you disagree? Was that the tone you meant? Were you as clear as you thought you were? When AI rewrote it, did that actually reflect what you meant? Or did it change it in a way that you were like, oh, I didn't understand, but now I do? I want you to think about how you're communicating. These are all process questions where AI now allows students to have an individualized experience that was not possible when there's one of me and 50 of them. So bringing AI in lets me individualize that and actually assess the process of learning. Now, other times it's more about the product of learning. And so one of the things that's really important to me as a psychologist is that my students are effective consumers of information in the media because psychological information is everywhere. So what I often now will do is I'll say, rather than write a paper, which used to be my assignment, let's face it, all over the place, write a paper. The assignment now literally is go to AI and have AI write the following paper for you. Now here's the assignment. Annotate it, critique it. Where did it make claims that it did not give citations for? When it gave citations, were they real? Were they hallucinated? Can you back it up? Do you notice any biases? Compare it to what the textbook said. Are there gaps? Did it come from a particular perspective? We just did a really interesting activity the other day. This was also in my social psychology course, where students went to AI and they uploaded a picture of themselves and they said, make me a family. And that was their assignment, to make a prompt that simply said, make me a family. And then we analyzed what kind of biases and stereotypes that AI utilized to make them a family. Because in every case, it made a heterogeneous man, woman, two children, every single one. And we're like, what does this mean? What other biases might exist? Because 100% of the time, it had a stereotypical view of what a family was. What other kinds of ways that AI answers things would influence how we as consumers receive information and understand it? Sometimes I just have them fact check it. We're going to do an activity together and then it's going to give you a reference list. Go through it. Are they real? Are they not real? If it's real, did it accurately reflect the assignment? This also is a great opportunity to talk about AI literacy. And I explain to students the way AI works is it looks at vast amount of training data. And from that, it's going to look at themes to determine what is most likely to be accurate information. Because of that, it's most of the time going to give you accurate information, but it's not pulling it from a source. So then when we ask it to give us references and to give us citations, it's going to go again and look at the themes. So it might pick authors that write in that field. It might pick journals that are relevant to that field. And it probably has titles that look like things in that field, but it's probably made up because AI didn't pull information from a source. It looked at vast amount of sources and looked for patterns. And that's why we get hallucinations. And that's why AI in general, when we look at generative AI models, are not necessarily great places to start for factual research. Now, that activity alone not only helps students understand whatever topic we're looking at, but it also helps them to start being more AI literate so that as they get information and engage with AI, they can do it in a much more meaningful fashion. It might be that we ask AI to give us analyses from different cultures, different contexts, different perspectives, and then we adapt it and we think about what that would look like. Was it accurate? Was it not accurate? Was it meaningful to you? It might be that we just ask it to go through and explain decision making. What do we keep? What do we discard? Why do we make those decisions? And in the end, what is the product that we're end up with? In these cases, AI is going to actually contribute to the graded artifact. And then I talk to students about the difference between attribution and citation. What does attribution mean? When do we provide attribution? And how is it different from citation? So not only are students learning about the topic in the course, but they're simultaneously learning about how to engage with AI as a consumer in this modern world we live in. And so as you start thinking about your own assignments, I want you to go back and think about what is it that I care about and what is it that I'm assessing? And are those things lined up? Because oftentimes what we care about really is much more process oriented, and we've just never had an opportunity to assess that before. And so AI might be able to let you do that. Now, as you're thinking about this, one of the first things people always say to me is like, oh my gosh, I don't know. AI is a great place for us as faculty to start this brainstorming as well. There have been many, many times when I'll go to AI and I will literally say, here's the old assignment that I did, and I'll share that old assignment. And I'll say, here's what I really care about. And oftentimes in my world, is I really cared about critical thinking. I really cared about application. I didn't care as much about memorization. I really didn't care as much about their ability to communicate it. I just want them to think. And I'll tell AI that. And I'll say, I really care the most about this. Help me brainstorm ways that I could actually use AI to see that. What kinds of things could we do? And AI then can help me brainstorm. And sometimes it's terrible. And I'll look at some of the ideas and I'll be like, oh my gosh, that is not what I need, which is why we, as effective consumers of AI, need to be there with our content expertise and our background as a faculty member to go through and make choices about what might work and what might not. And for the ones that then I get on that I'm like, ooh, that's an interesting idea, I'll say to AI, let's dig deeper into this one. Let's look at the pros, the cons, how students might be able to use AI to bypass this rather than actually assessing it. Help me brainstorm through this from a student perspective. And it not only does the same thing for students, but it helps me figure out how do I give this to students in a way that I can actually really try to target the things that I care most about. And then if I'm intentionally bringing AI in, how do I explain that to students? Because this is new for students. Most students, the data currently shows, are fearful of being accused of academic misconduct. So they don't really admit AI use even when they are using it properly because they just aren't sure what the rules and the guidelines are. So how do I bring it in? How do I communicate it with students? And how does the use of AI impact my ability to assess those learning objectives? So with these questions in mind, I'm going to give you a continuum that you can kind of start to think about where you might place some of your assignments. And I will tell you, I have assignments all over the continuum, depending on the particular learning objectives of that course, also the level of that course. It changes quite a bit. But the continuum just kind of helps you to think about how does the use of AI intersect with the learning that I care most about in my course. So let's dig into this. On the very far end of the continuum is, I call it level one, red. I use the AI stoplight just to make it visually clear to students where I fall on these AI things. But on level one, I tell students, the use of AI for this activity actually interferes with your learning. I need you to cognitively struggle with it. I need you to memorize it. I need you to understand it. Those are the things that fall into this bucket. So here's where I'll tell them, you need to be conversational in the language of our discipline. You can't assume that if somebody is talking to you in your professional context and they use the word correlation, that you're going to have time to run to AI and be like, remind me what a correlation is. No, you just need to know that. That's something you need. You need to have it in your head. You need to understand it. You need to be able to use it. You need to apply it in a context. Because of that, while you might be able to use AI to get up to speed on understanding that, I'm going to assess the product. Do you know it? And so that might be an in-class exam. That might be a timed exam. That might be an oral defense. Something in which I say, I do not want you to use AI, and I explain why. And that explanation of why is incredibly important. In fact, I'll give you an example from my own life. I have 3 kids in college right now, and we share a ChatGPT account. So I get to see exactly what they're doing on ChatGPT. And one day I'm working away and I've got ChatGPT up on one of my screens, and I can see popping up that my darling daughter, who's a freshman in college, is literally on her phone taking pictures of a quiz and just asking Chat for the answers. And that's it. I mean, literally just click, answer, click, answer, click, answer. And so I call my darling daughter up and I say, hey, why are you cheating? Like, seriously, this is one of my expertise areas. This is embarrassing to me as a mother. Like, what are you doing? And she was like, oh my gosh, mom, this is the dumbest assignment. The instructor makes us take a 10-question quiz before we ever get to class. So we've not talked about it. We've not gone over it. He hasn't answered any of our questions about it. We've only read the textbook, and then we have to take this quiz. And she goes, and the quiz is so stupid because we can take it as many times as we want. So even if I get all the answers wrong, I can just take it again until I get the answers right. She's like, it's the dumbest activity. If it had meaning, she goes, I would not cheat, but it's stupid. So that's why I'm cheating. And I said, did it ever occur to you that maybe the purpose of that quiz was not to assess your learning or to assess your understanding? That maybe the purpose of that quiz was to be sure you had opened the textbook, that you had at least reviewed prior to class, that you had thought about what questions you were getting right and what ones you were getting wrong, so that when you came to class, you could ask questions and say, hey, I got these wrong and I don't understand it. Can you explain it? Maybe the instructor is even using the answers of that quiz to help tailor the lecture so that when you guys get to class, as a class, he knows where you were struggling and where you weren't. So maybe that quiz is all about motivating your time on task in the textbook, because there is a huge body of literature that says if students will just read, that they learn pretty well, but that students won't read. So anything faculty can do to get students to read is going to increase their understanding. And if they come to class after they've read, it increases the quality of the class discussions. Did that occur to you? At which point she was quiet and she said, he never said that. But if he would have said that, I'm guessing, and I'm just guessing here, she would have been much more likely to do the activity as designed because she would have had the why. While some students are going to be inherent cheaters, AI didn't invent cheating. It's not going to be the be all end all. It just makes it a lot easier. When students understand the why and they see the purpose behind what we're asking them to do, they are much more likely to engage in a meaningful way. So when we tell students, this is a red activity and I do not want you to use AI, we have to also give them a why. And it has to be a logical why. So when I tell my students no AI, I tell them why no AI from a cognitive perspective. No AI because you need to have this memorized. And that's what this assessment is about, is making sure you've memorized it. Or no AI because I want you to really reflect on what it means to you, not what it means to AI. And when that's the case, and it's maybe a journal that you're doing, I'm not going to grade you on your writing or your communication because the purpose was reflection and application. And so I tell them, I will very clearly ensure I align the grade with what I care about, but I need you to align your time and task with the actual learning objectives. So I do have assignments that are red, no AI assignments. The next level, and this is where a lot of my assignments fall, it's in level 2, and this is a yellow. So like that's the indicator for students that you can use some AI, but with parameters. So slow down, look at the parameters. And level 2 is where I say you can use AI to help you get your ideas together, to prepare yourself, but it cannot make decisions for you and it cannot write for you. And so I'll tell them very clearly what they can and can't do. In most cases of mine that are level 2, I'll say, you can use it to help you brainstorm ideas. So if you aren't sure what you want to write about, if you aren't sure of a good example, if you need help thinking about your topic, you may use AI to brainstorm your topic. Or at the end, you can also use AI to help you proofread. And then I explain to them the difference between proofreading and having AI rewrite. And I say, proofreading's okay. You can upload it to AI and say, please point out to me where I have incorrect grammar, where my spelling is wrong, where my punctuation is wrong. Point these out to me so I can fix them. That is okay. You may not upload it and say, fix these for me. Because when you say fix these for me, it's also going to start rewriting things. And so in a level 2, I'm saying you can use it a little, but I'm going to put a lot of parameters and bumpers on what's allowed for that. Then level 3, we start to release those bumpers a little bit more. So it's still a yellow, telling students there's parameters, look and see the boundaries under which you can use this. But now I might say, start to use it as a collaborator. So you can use it to help you create the outlines. You could even maybe use it to help you summarize some background material. You can use it to help you maybe with some data, cleaning it up, looking for outliers, looking for patterns, but you're actually going to start collaborating. So if we wanted to differentiate between level 2 and level 2, they're really just using it to help them get started and to help them clean up. but I don't really want them collaborating in an ongoing way with it. In level 3, now you're going to start collaborating with it. I want you to engage with it. You can ask it questions, but I want you to give your input back as well. You're going to use it as a partner. Then in level 4, now we start moving into green, because here's where they can now use it collaboratively, and the AI generated content might be part of the product that they're turning in. So here's where the assignment might literally say, yes, you're going to do a critique of the AI stuff, and you're going to turn in the AI stuff along with your stuff. You're going to turn in your thoughts, your revisions, your annotations, whatever it might be. You're going to talk about what you changed, why you changed it. You might talk about how you prompted, why you prompted. It's not just that they gave you the output, but it's going to be giving you output along with evidence of that collaboration. Where did you put your input in? Where did AI put AI's input in? But AI is going to absolutely be part of this. For me, I think the easiest way to differentiate between yellow and green is in yellow, I'm giving them permission to use AI if they would like under certain boundaries. In green, using AI is an expectation, and I'm still going to give some boundaries. But in this case, I'm going to actually say, like, you need to use AI, because use of AI and interaction with AI is going to be part of what is necessary to meet our learning objectives. So if we go back, red, I don't want you to use AI because the use of AI will undermine the learning. Yellow is you can use AI to support you, but you don't need to use AI. But I will tell you how you can if you would like. Green is then you will be using AI in some way, and depending on the level of green, I'll tell you how that it's okay for this particular assignment. And then when we get into level 5, now it's really saying AI is part of what we're looking at. So here's where the assignment might actually be: go to AI, do this, critique it, analyze it. I just did one of these last week, I think it was, in my it was my history of psychology class. And I told students they were really struggling to understand some of the philosophical foundations from which the field was built. And it feels so abstract to them. So I said, what I want you to do is I want you to go to AI and tell AI you want it to act like a specific philosopher. So you can go back, you can say, you're going to be Descartes, or you're going to be whoever. You're going to talk to me and debate with me from the perspective of that philosopher. And then I tell students, now pick an issue that's happening right now in your world that you know, that you understand, and you care about. And now debate with that philosopher about that. Because if you can take something you know, and then you can understand this philosophical position and how it would influence a thing you know, from that, we can now go back and say, okay, now we're understanding the philosophical position itself, and we can move forward. But they really needed something to latch it onto that they could relate to. And they were not relating to what was happening, back hundreds of years ago. And so the assignment was go debate with this AI philosopher. And then when we came back as a class, and this was an online class. So when I said come back as a class, I'm talking about a threaded discussion. I literally said, like, did it debate well? Did it show biases? What did you learn? What was unexpected? How do you understand that philosophical position differently now than you did before? And some of them said, I didn't really. I don't feel like I got a good grasp. And then we talked about why and what that looked like and how that interaction looked. So you now are using AI not only to explore your discipline, but you're exploring AI with your discipline. So here's where, again, you can look at bias. You can talk about limitations. One of the things we talk a lot about is when they go look at AI, it's going to give a lot that's really accurate for theoretical foundations, but it's probably not going to be accurate for emerging research. And so let's talk about what the emerging research says in relationship to what we're seeing when we go and ask for these AI summaries or AI things. So in this case, we really have simultaneous goals of our learning objectives of the course, along with some AI literacy goals. And then at the highest level, we have AI really is the environment. And in these cases, we just turn it over to students and say, this is the goal, and this is what you're going to need to do as a professional. And so you can use whatever tools you have available to you, and I'm going to evaluate the output, but I'm not really going to weigh in on where you used AI or how. I have in my undergraduate courses very few of the level 6 assignments. And the ones that I do have tend to be in the capstone courses. So one of them that I have that's a level 6, use AI however you need to use AI, is design your resume and your CV. This is going to be something you're going to take out in the world with you. Use whatever tool is available to you to make that happen. Use AI, interact with AI, have AI ask you questions. Because in the end, what I care about is, were you able to put together this product? I also have one that's on their portfolio where I say, I want you to put together a professional portfolio reflecting back across your last 4 years, where you really think about where you have evidence of the skill sets that you've had. I tell them you can use AI however you want for this. And students have said, I go to AI and I say, like, here's the courses I've taken, here's what I can remember. I don't know what skill sets I have. Help me figure this out. Help me showcase it. But I don't put any restrictions on how they're using AI or if they're using AI for them. For me personally, the vast majority of mine are somewhere between level 2 and level 4. I have some that venture into level 5. More of my level 5 is upper division classes and my graduate courses. And I have very few. Like, I bet I could only count on one hand the number of level 6 assignments that I have. Because in most cases, my students are not AI savvy enough, and my learning objectives, I really do need to see more of their own process and their own thoughts. So, level 6 where it's appropriate, but you'll have to look at your own discipline and figure out, what does that look like? As another example, my son, who's also in college, he's a senior engineering major. He said, Mom, like, my faculty hardly talk about this at all. They don't care if we're using AI. And I said, well, that's definitely a disciplinary difference. And he goes, in fact, I think they almost expect that we will, because in my profession, writing code right now, they're expecting us to produce at a rate. Nobody could be writing 800 lines of code a night, but you need to know the technologies to write the code to keep up with. And I'm like, absolutely, disciplinary difference in the learning objectives. So you really do have to think about, what am I trying to accomplish? When you start to go beyond just, am I allowing AI or am I not allowing AI, you can really start to push yourself back to those learning objectives. Like, it pushes you beyond yes or no for AI into, how does AI help me assess the learning I actually care about? And then you can start digging deeper, because it really does come down to, what are you trying to accomplish as a faculty member? What do you need to see from your students to know that they're meeting your objectives? And how does that work for your discipline and for what you are trying to accomplish? Because AI does not exist in a continuum. In addition to that, you need to think about your students. How much AI exposure do they have? How much AI literacy training is available at your institution? If your institution has done nothing with AI literacy training, you might actually need to build in a little bit of that if you're even going to bring in level 3 assignments, because the students just don't have any structured guidance on that. You also need to ask, do my students have access to these tools? Some institutions now have the licenses that all students have access, some don't. And if your students don't have institutional access, you need to be really sure that you're not creating assignments where students that have paid access have advantages over students who do not have paid access. And so a lot of this comes down to you really thinking about what works for you and your students in your assignments. I'll tell you, I've found that when I really want students to think, and kind of some of those the red level 1 assignments, I found that video journals was really effective, that students would just turn on their webcam and talk to me. That worked great until I have a class of 150. And then I don't have time to listen to 150 video journals. So I have to do something different, even though I know pedagogically the video journal was great. It doesn't work for my class size and my grading capacity. So you really do need to think about this holistically, whether you're teaching face-to-face, online, how big your class is, your university's access, your university's prep for AI. There is no one-size-fits-all answer that I can tell you, this is what you should do. But I can give you a framework for you to start walking through what's going to be most meaningful for your students. So you really want to ask yourself, in your context, what's realistic? How does that change depending on the level of course I'm teaching? How much time do I have to grade? Because while I can say I love when they submit the chat logs because I can see their thinking, it can take a long time for me to dig through chat logs because AI produces a lot of content. And so it can take me a while. It's really hard to do big full chat logs if I have a class of more than about 35 students. So I have to think about what's reasonable within that course context. And then my discipline. I'm not in a tech discipline, I'm in psychology. And so, really, when I talk about AI literacy as it relates to psychology majors, it's a lot more about information literacy and understanding bias and discrimination and all those kinds of things, much more so than it is I need them to be really AI literate in producing stuff, which might be different if they were in marketing or engineering or communication. So you need to think about your context and how that's going to influence what's happening for you. Now, as I say all this, sometimes it becomes so overwhelming that you're like, oh my gosh, my learning objectives, and I have so many assignments, and I have so many things happening in my class. You could start small. And one of the things that I suggest is if you're like, I'm not ready to rehaul everything and I don't even know where to start, is just to maybe ask yourself, are there assignments that I have now that I actually think are working fairly well, but that students might be able to just complete with AI and not meet the objectives of the assignments? I call these AI vulnerable assignments. And if that's the case, there's a 5R redesign process that's really helpful to just say, okay, I'm just going to start with one assignment and I'm going to go through this one assignment. And again, you're going to start with your learning outcomes. That's the most important part, but you need to be clear to yourself what you hope students can accomplish when they're done and what your assessment is designed to measure. But then, before you do anything, just take your assignment the exact same way you give it to students and just put it in AI and see what you get. Because if AI can complete your assignment as is, and the product that it gives you would score well on your rubric, the first thing you can do is maybe just say, okay, I'm just going to revise it a little bit. And when I do this, I will often then go back to AI and say, okay, as written, this was super easy for AI to complete this assignment. Help me revise my prompt for students so that it makes it more personal, that it makes it more critical. I want something that's not quite as easy for students to simply put into AI and get the product back out. And then I tweak it and I adjust it. So you don't have to start with the whole class overhaul. You can start with one assignment and go through the 5R process. And then as part of that, once I've redesigned it, I remind students, is this a red, a yellow, or a green assignment? And if it is yellow or red, I give them the why. Why do I not want you to use AI and just put this prompt in? And I'll often even tell students, I've put the prompt in. I see what it produces. It's going to produce something relatively similar for all of you. So if any of you are just using this to bypass the learning process, chances are I'll be able to tell by the output that it produces. The other thing that we need to think about is that students' time and attention is 100% driven by grades. We have data over years and years and years that tell us if students have to choose between getting a good grade and having average learning or getting an average grade but learning a lot, they're going to choose the grade every single time. And it makes sense. Their grades determine scholarships and it returns outcomes and it determines honor societies. Grades determine a lot of things. So it makes sense that students put their attention where the grades are. So if we don't want them to use AI to bypass the learning process, we also need to redesign our grading structure. And we need to make sure we're putting the weight of our grading where we want students to put the weight of their time. Because if we tell students, I want you to struggle and I want you to think and I want you to grapple with these ideas, and then we grade them and say, oh, you didn't clearly communicate that, and you didn't have your APA citations correct, and you didn't have a logical argument behind your thesis. Well, now we're just motivating them to go to AI because we graded them on the prettiness and the well communicated artifact that they were able to produce, not on their thinking. So we want to really kind of reduce the grading emphasis on what I call the polish. It doesn't have to just look good. I want to be able to see if you met the learning objectives and if you could think and if you could really dive into that. And when you want them to think and use it, add in that as a grading criteria. It is okay to grade them on reflection. It is okay to grade them on analyzing what they didn't understand or what they got wrong, that metacognitive process, because they will spend their time where the grade is at. And so you can even tell students, I do want you to use AI, but I want you to think. So maybe we're going to use some AI use logs and you're just going to keep track of how you're using it. You might just have them tack on a reflective statement where they talk about how they used it. You might, if they're going to submit these to you, because it could be really long to read all of them, just spot check because you don't necessarily need to read the whole thing. You just need to know they were being thoughtful. And so you can kind of balance that I need to grade everything with I need students to think and process. And throughout all of this, communicate with the students because we know they're going to focus on the grade. We know that they're going to do what they have to do to try to complete that assignment on time. We also know they're busy and they are ruthlessly efficient. So be consistent. Reduce the cognitive load that surrounds them trying to figure out what you want from them. So use consistent language. This is where the AI stoplight comes in for me, is that if I get them on this mindset that they know levels 1 through 6, they see the color pop up, it's very consistent on what they can do. So now they don't have to put as much mental energy into thinking about what's okay and what's not. And I also give them examples of what's okay and what's not. Like I said, I don't just say you can use AI for proofreading. I say you can use AI to proofread. You can let it give you what to correct. You can have it point these out. You cannot have it rewrite it for you. So you have to give that distinction because if you just say you can use it to proofread, that means something different to different students. So the more you can communicate that clearly and that you can tie all of these rules to a true learning goal, the more you're going to get students on the same page. As I indicated, even though I use the 6 levels, I frame them in the stoplight because it's these quick visual grabs that have students like, okay, if I'm not reading super closely, and let's face it, students often don't read super closely, they at least have the big visual grab to give them some insights as to where it could be. So when you put it all together, as you start to move through your course, just keep your focus on learning. You don't have to do this with every assignment immediately as you start going through it. You can start by picking out some of the assignments that are most problematic for you. And then think about what you're trying to do. Think about where AI fits, adjust your prompt, put it on the stoplight, communicate it to students, and then be prepared to adjust. Because as AI evolves, our teaching is going to have to evolve with it. So start small. Start and play with some of your problem areas first. And once you feel comfortable with that, adjust and scale it to some of the other areas. You are the content expert. You are going to get a sense of what's working and what's not. I think the biggest challenge really is that mindset shift away from what is AI and back to how does AI help or hinder my ability to meet these learning objectives? So, with that said, we are right at 50 minutes. So, I'll let Bob say if we have time for any questions or comments or not. And I've got a drippy nose. I apologize. And if we don't have time for questions or comments, I would encourage any of you to shoot me an email and I'm happy to continue the conversation offline. And I see a hand up, unless that was me that put my hand up. Maybe it is me that put my hand up on accident. Well, I am not seeing any comments or questions pop. I mean, I've seen any comments pop in. Thank you for the positive feedback. But if other things come up, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, Jane. And folks, don't forget that Jane is the editor of the Journal of Educators Online that have a bunch. What is it? Going back to 2004, is it? A
I think
long
so.
time. There's a zillion refereed articles there that are worth your time to explore. Hey, Gene, as always, this is really a good presentation. Lots of
Thank
things
you.
for us to ponder. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay, I'm gonna see many, I hope, at the top of the hour for our next session.